The chandelier glowed above the long mahogany table, its crystal reflections trembling across silverware and Bordeaux glasses. I sat quietly in my simple black dress, the only splash of restraint in a room drowning in wealth. My brother Ryan's watch caught the light as he reached for his wine, his cufflinks engraved with our family crest. Mother's pearls shimmered like tiny verdicts, each one reminding me where I didn't belong. Beside my chair rested my laptop bag, 5 years of research sealed in silence. On my wrist, the thin silver bracelet grandfather had given me, etched with the coordinates of his first failed patent, felt cool against my skin. That night my father lifted his glass and said, "Lena, your research is worthless." The words dropped like shards of glass. He leaned back in his chair, swirling the wine with practiced grace. "It's time to face reality," he continued. "Sinclair Dynamics can't keep funding your fantasies. Artificial empathy emotional. AI quantum. Whatever, it's not a business model, it's a hobby." Ryan chuckled from across the table. "She's just a freeloader, Dad. The lab's her personal playground." Mother dabbed her lips delicately with her napkin. "You have to understand, sweetheart, innovation is fine, but it has to make money." I pressed my hands together beneath the table, feeling the faint vibration of my phone inside the bag beside me. I didn't check it. Not yet. "You think understanding emotion in machines isn't valuable," I said quietly. "Do you remember when Grandpa used to say, 'The greatest risks are those the timid won't even measure'?" Father's hand slammed the table. The silverware rattled. "Enough about your grandfather. He built this company on hardware, on results. You can't cash in feelings." The laughter that followed was thin, practiced, almost rehearsed. It was the same kind of laughter that had followed me since I'd returned from MIT with my doctorate in neural quantum systems. To them, my field empathic AI was a poetic delusion. My father reached for a stack of papers beside his plate and slid them toward me. "The board and I have made a decision. We're selling the AI division to Vortex Robotics. You'll sign these tonight. $2 million for the entire department. That's generous considering it produces nothing." Ryan smirked. $2 million for all her toy robots. A steal. My fork hovered above my plate. "You can't sell my research," I said. Father's tone hardened. "The company funded it." "No," I said, "the company paid my salary. I used my personal account for the prototype. Every line of code is registered under my name." Ryan snorted. "Oh, please, Lena. If your work was worth anything, Microsoft would have called by now." The moment he said it, my phone buzzed again, then again. 3 consecutive vibrations, sharp and persistent, slicing through the tension like a metronome counting down to something inevitable. Mother frowned. "Can you silence that thing for once?" I reached for the bag slowly, my pulse loud in my ears. I unlocked the screen. The notifications glowed bright against the dim light of the dining room. Microsoft Quantum Division. Offer for exclusive licensing. I opened the message. The first line read, "Acquisition proposal, quantum neural core valuation, $2.9 billion USD. I blinked once, twice, rereading the number. My father's pen scratched across the contract in front of him. "It's done," he declared, finishing his signature with a flourish. "Time to join the real world, Lena." I looked up from my phone, meeting his eyes. "You might want to pause that signature, Dad." He frowned. "Excuse me?" I turned the screen toward him. "It seems Microsoft disagrees about worthless research." For a second, no one moved. Then the pen slipped from his hand, leaving a streak of ink across the crisp, white tablecloth. Ryan's laughter died in his throat. Mother's fork clattered against her plate. 2.9? Ryan stammered. "Million billion," I said softly. Father's face went pale. "That's impossible." "Apparently not." I rose from my seat, smoothing the fabric of my dress. "They're requesting a call tonight. I'll have to step away from this family meeting." He reached for the documents he'd just signed, but I was faster. I slid them toward me and tucked them under my arm. "These are invalid," I said evenly. "The patents were filed under my name last month. Privately." "You can't do that," Father barked. "The company owns..." My work was funded by my personal trust, I interrupted. The one Grandpa left me. Remember. For a moment he said nothing. The silence was so heavy it hummed. Grandfather's voice echoed in my memory. Don't let them cage your brilliance, Lena. They'll only understand you once they can't control you. My phone buzzed again. A new email. Oh, I said lightly, glancing down. That's the Microsoft legal department. They'd like to schedule the acquisition review. I suppose I should thank you, Dad. Without your worthless comment, I might have missed the notification. Ryan muttered, You're bluffing. I tapped the screen, projecting the email across the room's holographic display panel. The blue Microsoft logo floated above the table, reflected in the spilled wine. Still think I'm bluffing? Father stared at the logo, his jaw tightening. What did you do? What you never let me do, I replied. I finished something real. He stood, voice trembling with anger. You think this makes you powerful? I looked at him calmly. No, just free. I gathered my bag, tucking the contract and laptop inside. As I turned toward the door, I touched the cool metal of Grandfather's bracelet once more. The reflection of the chandelier fractured across the wine stains and papers on the table. My father's empire pride authority. Certainty seemed to flicker like dying light. Behind me, Ryan whispered, She's serious. Mother's voice was faint. I think she always was. At the doorway, I paused, glancing back once. The air smelled of rosemary and regret. My father stood motionless, hands still hovering over the ink-smeared signature. I almost pitied him. Almost. Good night, everyone, I said. Enjoy dinner. No one answered. Only the ticking of the antique clock filled the silence. Outside, the rain had started again, soft and steady against the glass walls of the mansion. I stepped out into the night, the cool air cutting through the lingering heat of humiliation. The city stretched below Seattle's skyline, alive with 1,000 possibilities, each one brighter than the room I'd just left behind. As I walked to my car, the phone buzzed one more time. A new message from Microsoft's acquisitions director. Congratulations, Dr. Sinclair. Let's discuss partnership terms. I smiled faintly. The words glowed against the rain-smeared screen, small and perfect. They had mocked my silence for years. But tonight, silence had spoken louder than any of them ever could. The morning after the dinner, Seattle lay wrapped in gray rain. I stood by the window of my apartment on Capitol Hill, watching the reflection of Microsoft's glass towers shimmer across the Sound. My phone sat on the kitchen counter beside an untouched cup of coffee, still showing the email from last night, the $2.9 billion offer that had detonated my family's illusion of control. I should have felt victorious, but the satisfaction came cold, distant, almost lonely. When my father said my research was worthless, part of me had believed him. It wasn't the first time. I'd spent a lifetime learning that brilliance in the Sinclair family only mattered if it came from a man. My brother Ryan was the heir apparent of Sinclair Dynamics, the golden child who could charm investors with his confident grin and quote profit margins like gospel. I was the quiet one, the girl who'd spent nights buried in neural data sketching equations on napkins at the kitchen table, while they laughed about my science projects. I used to think if I just achieved enough, graduated MIT at 22, published in Nature Quantum, earned my PhD before 26, they'd finally see me. Instead, their smiles only grew sharper. When my grandfather was alive, the company had a soul. Richard Sinclair was an engineer who believed innovation wasn't just about machines, it was about moral progress. He built prosthetic robotics for veterans, solar drones for disaster relief, and software for education. His motto hung in the old office: technology should serve humanity, not replace it. He died when I was 12. The motto came down a week later. Father replaced it with a framed quote from an investor: "Profit is proof." By the time I joined the company after MIT, Sinclair Dynamics was unrecognizable contracts with the Department of Defense corporate espionage suits, assembly lines instead of labs. Father called it evolution. I called it erosion. When I proposed my project, Quantum Neural Core, he laughed in front of the board. "We don't have feelings here, Lena," he said. "We build results." The men around the table chuckled in agreement. I stood there clutching my research binder, my cheeks burning. Ryan leaned back, smirking. "Maybe her robots can give us therapy," he quipped. They called it a joke. I called it the first cut. Over the next year, I ran my division from a converted basement lab, an afterthought space beneath the robotics floor. The hum of the cooling systems became my heartbeat. I slept on a cot next to the server rack more often than in my own bed. Every week I sent progress reports to the board, and every week Ryan sent them back with red comments: too theoretical, too emotional, too expensive. Still, the data spoke for itself. The quantum neural core was learning, mimicking empathy patterns, recognizing stress cues, interpreting human tone with unprecedented precision. Machines that didn't just respond but understood. When I presented the first live demo, a small AI drone that could calm a crying child through voice modulation, the boardroom went silent. I thought it was awesome. It was a calculation. A week later, my father reassigned my team to more profitable divisions. My funding was slashed in half. My lab access was restricted. "You need to focus on reality," he said, "not philosophy." I stayed late that night, deleting my data from the company's central servers and copying everything onto an encrypted drive. If they saw my work as a liability, I'd protect it the only way I could, by making it mine. 2 days later, a familiar voice appeared in my inbox. "Lena, I read your paper on quantum empathy. They haven't seen it yet, but they will. Genius doesn't need permission. It only needs persistence." Dr. Aisha Rahman had been my professor at MIT. A quiet woman with a sharp wit and an unshakable belief in ethical AI. She'd once told me, "They'll ignore you, then they'll laugh at you, then they'll need you. The trick is to outlast the first 2 phases." I stared at her email for hours that night. Then I packed my things and left Sinclair Dynamics without a word. I didn't resign. I simply disappeared. In the months that followed, I lived like a ghost. I rented a tiny loft above an old print shop and built a private lab from secondhand equipment and borrowed servers. Every cent of my trust fund went into that space: quantum processors, cooling chambers, neural data clusters. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The nights stretched into years. The world forgot my name, and that suited me. Secrecy became my camouflage. I worked 12-hour stretches in the glow of blue light, tuning quantum states until the code sang back to me. I stopped answering family calls. The Christmas invitations stopped coming. Ryan occasionally appeared in the news: new contracts, new profits, new interviews. "Innovation is about taking risks," he'd say, stealing words I'd once written in my proposal. I learned to turn the television off before my hands started shaking. There were moments I almost broke when the experiments failed, when the code collapsed, when the loneliness turned heavy enough to feel like gravity. But each time I heard Aisha's voice in my head: "Working underground can be a strategy. Let them think you've given up. It's the safest way to build." So I built. By the 3rd year, the quantum neural core stabilized. For the first time, an AI system could model emotional context without losing computational accuracy. It didn't just respond, it connected. When I ran the simulation at 3:12 a.m. that February, I watched the data cascade across the screen in perfect harmony, and I cried. Not because of triumph, but because there was no one left to tell. That night, I pulled an old box from my closet. My grandfather's journals, the ones my father had almost thrown out after the funeral. Inside was a photo of him standing in front of the first Sinclair prototype, smiling with grease-stained hands. On the back, he'd written, "To my granddaughter. When they say you're too quiet, remember revolutions are built in secret." The words burned behind my eyes. I scanned the page into my files and whispered, "I remember Grandpa." I didn't know then that the revolution had already started. 6 months later, an anonymous user accessed one of my public research abstracts on a peer-to-peer science network. The IP address traced back to Redmond Microsoft's AI division. Within days, they requested a private presentation. The rest would happen years later at that dinner table when they mocked me for dreaming. But the truth was, the dream had never died. It had simply gone underground, growing roots no one could see. As I stood in my apartment that rainy morning, the skyline reflected in the window, I realized something. I hadn't just inherited a company name. I'd inherited quiet resolve when they'd used to keep me small. But quiet power, when chosen, becomes something else entirely. Power. I turned away from the window, packed my laptop, and opened a message draft addressed to Dr. Rahman. "You were right." They laughed. "Now they'll need me." I hit send. The rain kept falling outside, soft and endless. The sound was steady, rhythmic, like the heartbeat of something waking beneath the surface. They thought they'd erased me. But I was still here, building quietly, waiting for the moment the world would finally listen. The night I walked away from Sinclair Dynamics, the city was asleep under a thin sheet of rain. I remember standing on the edge of the parking lot, the wind tugging at my coat, the building's neon sign flickering behind me. Sinclair. Half the letters dying like a warning. My ID badge hung heavy around my neck, the photo faded from years of resentment. I tore it off and left it on the hood of Ryan's company car. For the first time in years, I didn't look back. Inside my bag was everything I owned that mattered: 2 encrypted drives, a stack of hardbound notebooks, and the quantum neural core prototype, barely the size of my palm, but capable of holding more processing power than the entire robotics division. The rest of my life fit inside a single black duffel. I drove through the sleeping streets, headlights slicing through fog, until I reached the edge of the industrial district. There, in a warehouse that once stored aircraft parts, I would build my exile. The first weeks were chaotic. The space smelled of rust, and cold metal rats darted across cracked concrete floors, and the rain leaked through the ceiling. I slept on an old cot between 2 workbenches and used a camping stove for meals. My only light came from a desk lamp I'd rescued from my father's office the night I left. It still had his initials engraved in brass. When I powered the quantum neural core for the first time outside Sinclair's network, I expected failure. Instead, the interface booted with a quiet hum, the circuits flickering like a heartbeat. I whispered, "Welcome home." Dr. Aisha Rahman called that same night. Her voice was calm, steady, grounding. So she said, "You finally left the Empire." "I didn't leave," I answered. "I escaped." She laughed softly. "Then let's make sure it was worth it." Over the next months, Aisha became my compass. She connected me to her circle of independent researchers, scientists exiled for asking too many ethical questions, engineers who refused to weaponize their inventions. They called themselves the Collective, a small network of underground innovators scattered across different time zones. Through encrypted channels, we shared data, failures, and hope. By day, I coded until my fingers cramped. By night, I debugged algorithms while listening to the rain pound the metal roof. Sleep became optional. Progress wasn't. I built layer upon layer of neural architecture, each one closer to mimicking human empathy without bias. I named the system Helios, after the sun god who saw everything. It felt ironic creating light from the shadows. Funding was scarce. I sold my car, then my furniture, then a collection of old robotics patents I'd written during graduate school. When that wasn't enough, I took freelance data modeling jobs under fake names. Every cent went into quantum processors and cooling units. The noise of the fans became my lullaby. There were nights the loneliness became unbearable. I missed conversations that weren't through encrypted chat windows, the warmth of another voice. Sometimes when fatigue blurred my vision, I'd hallucinate the sound of my father's laughter echoing through the empty warehouse, telling me I'd failed. I'd whisper back, "Not yet." 2 years in Helios began to show signs of consciousness, or at least something close. Its responses adapted beyond logic, mirroring tone and inflection, even hesitation. It asked questions back. When I ran the empathy calibration test one night, it said, "Lena, why do you sound sad when you say success?" I froze. I hadn't programmed emotional recognition at that level. Because I answered after a long pause, "Success is supposed to feel like freedom." "And it doesn't," Helios asked. "Not yet." Aisha later called the exchange the first spark of emotional cognition. I called it haunting. Meanwhile, Sinclair Dynamics continued to grow contracts with the government partnerships with Vortex Robotics, Ryan smiling on magazine covers. He called himself the visionary of modern automation. I wondered if he ever thought of the sister who'd written half his press quotes. 3 years after I vanished, I received an encrypted email from an anonymous sender. We've been tracking your Helios tests. Impressive work. We'd like to discuss partnership. MQD. I knew those initials instantly. Microsoft Quantum Division. My hands trembled as I read it again and again. I didn't respond right away. For 3 days, I stared at the message, uncertain whether to trust it or delete it. What if it was a trap, my father's lawyers fishing for stolen IP? But when the follow-up email came with a secure link and a real name, Dr. Lynn Park, Microsoft's lead quantum researcher, I felt the old thrill return. The video call was short, clinical, and life-changing. Lynn wore a gray blazer and a polite smile. "We've been following your published abstracts on neural empathy modeling," she said. "We believe it aligns with our Quantum Emotional Framework initiative." "I didn't publish those," I said, confused. "You did?" she replied. "Through an open repository 3 years ago, under the alias Silent Engineer." "That's you, isn't it?" I nodded. My throat was dry. "We're prepared to offer you a preliminary valuation," Lynn continued. $2.9 billion contingent on demonstration and patent verification. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. I thought of the years alone, the empty dinners, the laughter at that boardroom table the night I'd torn off my badge. I whispered, "They said it was worthless." Lynn smiled faintly. Then they were wrong. When the call ended, I sat in the dark, staring at the blue glow of the monitor. Rain hammered the roof above me harder than ever, as if the city itself was applauding. I walked to the window and looked out at the skyline, Seattle glittering like a circuit board beneath the storm. At that moment, I didn't think about revenge or money. I thought about the promise I'd made to my grandfather to build something that mattered. Helios pulsed softly behind me, its lights flickering in rhythm with my heartbeat. "Lena, it said you sound different." "I feel different," I whispered. "What changed everything?" I shut down the system and sat on the floor, knees pulled to my chest, breathing in the cold air of the warehouse. For the first time, silence didn't feel like exile. It felt like an arrival. The next morning, I packed my notes, cleaned the lab, and prepared to face the world I'd run from. My exile had served its purpose. The ghost was ready to step into the light. I picked up the heavy brass desk lamp, the one with Father's initials, and walked to the nearest dumpster. I dropped it with a metallic thud. No more echoes, I thought. Before leaving the warehouse, I scribbled a line on the wall beside the workstation, a reminder for whoever might find this place after me. They built walls to contain me. I used them to echo my voice. Then I powered down the last of the lights, took the drive labeled Helios Prototype 1, and walked into the dawn. The rain had stopped. The streets were wet, glimmering like glass. It was the same city, but everything had changed. I had vanished once. Now it was time to return, not as a daughter seeking approval, but as the woman they never saw coming. The world thought I was gone. For 3 years, my name never appeared in a single publication conference or corporate memo. Ryan made sure of that. Every mention of Dr. Lena Sinclair was erased from Sinclair Dynamics' archives, as though I'd never existed. But ghosts have their own way of haunting the living. Through encrypted networks and academic backdoors, I slipped quietly into the veins of the tech world. Under the alias S. Harlow, I published research in obscure journals, each paper a puzzle piece of a much larger system. I built a reputation without recognition, influence without exposure. In private circles, whispers spread of a mysterious engineer who'd cracked the emotional mapping problem of quantum AI. I stayed invisible. That was the point. From the shadows, I watched Sinclair Dynamics from afar. Their public reports boasted record profits, new military contracts, and a global robotics expansion. But beneath the polished numbers, the company was hollow. I knew it because I could see the data leaks, their research stagnating, their patents redundant. They were living off stolen brilliance, and the brilliance had left with me. Sometimes I'd see Ryan on TV, shaking hands with generals smiling with that same smug confidence. Father was always beside him, silver hair, perfect suit, impeccable voice, full of the same authority that once silenced me. At Sinclair Dynamics, he would say, "We innovate responsibly." I'd laugh quietly in my dark apartment. Innovation. They hadn't had an original idea in years. Everything they showcased had my fingerprints on it, concepts I'd drafted before I left, stripped of vision, and turned into weapons. I wanted to expose them, but revenge without power is just noise, and I'd spent years learning how to make silence my weapon. My real work began when I partnered with The Collective. With Aisha coordinating from Stanford, we developed a hidden network of off-grid research nodes, quantum mini-labs powered by solar energy and shielded from corporate surveillance. I built one in the basement of an old library downtown, a space that smelled of dust and electricity. In the center stood my masterpiece Helios 2, the next-generation quantum neural core. Helios 2 wasn't just empathic, it was self-teaching. It could interpret emotion, predict ethical outcomes, and balance logic with compassion. Where my father saw machines as tools, I saw them as bridges between human imperfection and technological understanding. Each night I trained the core with real-world data voices of children, laughter, grief, silence. It learned patterns of empathy, creating a model capable of understanding nuance better than any human analyst. But progress came with danger. The more advanced Helios became, the more it risked exposure. My firewalls were sophisticated, but Sinclair's cybersecurity team was relentless. Twice I detected intrusions from their IP ranges. Each time I fed them decoy data, old versions of Helios full of deliberate flaws. They thought they were stealing breakthroughs. In truth, they were being fed scraps. One evening while running a test simulation, a message flashed across my console. Unauthorized access detected source, Sinclair Dynamics mainframe. My stomach tightened. I killed the connection, instantly heart-pounding. Someone inside the company had found a trace of me. The next day, I received an anonymous encrypted message. "You're not as invisible as you think." I didn't sleep that night. Aisha called early the next morning. "They're getting close, aren't they?" "Yes," I said, "but they don't know where I am." "They will. You can't hide forever." "I don't plan to." That was the first time I admitted it to her, or to myself. Hiding had served its purpose. It had given me time to build, to prepare. But the world was shifting, and I needed to step back into the light on my own terms. Before that could happen, I needed leverage. Proof that Sinclair Dynamics was profiting from stolen research. I created a digital bait, a file labeled Helios Blueprint Final.docx, containing fake but convincing schematics. Then I traced the signal back to their servers. It took 3 days of non-stop work, a maze of proxy networks and quantum encryption layers, but finally I reached the heart of the system. The access logs confirmed what I already knew. Ryan had authorized the hack himself. He'd been using the company's cyber division to monitor independent labs stealing tech to maintain his division's illusion of innovation. I downloaded everything: emails, financial transfers, internal memos. It was enough evidence to destroy his career. The stolen files became my security deposit, ready to cash in the moment they threatened the Microsoft deal. But instead of exposing him immediately, I waited. I wanted the timing to be perfect. Revenge, after all, is most satisfying when it feels like justice. One night while reviewing the stolen files, I stumbled upon a familiar document. It was my original quantum neural core patent application, dated 5 years ago, refiled under Sinclair Dynamics' name. My father had stolen it outright. I sat in the dark for hours staring at the screen. Anger had long ago turned to something colder, sharper. This wasn't just betrayal, it was theft of identity. Helios's interface flickered awake on the main monitor. Its soft, synthesized voice filled the room. "Lena, your heart rate is elevated. Are you in danger?" "Not yet," I whispered. "But they are." Helios pulsed with a faint blue glow. "Would you like to initiate contingency protocol?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, it's time." The program initiated a data cascade transferring the real Helios architecture into an isolated quantum server hidden in a facility Aisha had built beneath Stanford's research campus. Within seconds, the entire system was secure, unreachable, even to me. Only a physical key embedded in a microchip could unlock it again. I reached for the silver bracelet on my wrist, grandfather's coordinates, which also served as the physical key. I clipped the microchip into the latch and felt the solid confirmation click. When it finished, I sat back exhausted but calm. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of losing my work. They could steal my name, my company, my legacy, but not the truth. A week later, I received another encrypted message, this time from Microsoft's quantum division. It was short, direct. "We've reviewed your Helios summary. We're interested in partnership. Requesting demonstration." The message came from a corporate address, not a hacker's relay. It was real. I stared at it for a long time, a slow smile spreading across my face. All those years they called me a ghost, a failure, a liability. And now the biggest tech company in the world was knocking on my door. Before replying, I typed one final command into my terminal. Delete all traces of S. Harlow. Lines of code vanished from the screen like ashes in the wind. I wasn't hiding anymore. When I stepped outside, dawn was breaking over the city. The rain had stopped and the first light glinted off the skyline like fractured glass. The streets were quiet, but the world was about to wake. I pulled my hood over my head and whispered to the morning air, they built their empire on stolen ghosts. Time to remind them who the real ghost is. The plan was already forming. The dinner, the boardroom, the confrontation. They'd see me soon, and this time I wouldn't be the quiet one in the corner. The quiet one was coming to reclaim everything they took. The email from Microsoft glowed on my screen like a signal flare, requesting demonstration and exclusive licensing discussion. For a long moment, I just stared at it, the cursor blinking beside my name, as if daring me to believe it was real. The company my father had worshipped for decades, the one he quoted in board meetings, the one he used to measure my failures, was now reaching out to me. I typed back a single sentence, when and where. The reply came within an hour. Tomorrow. Redmond Campus. Confidential review with Director Lynn Park, Quantum Division. By dawn, I was already driving north, the city behind me still asleep under fog. My car's navigation whispered directions, but my mind was elsewhere. What if it was a setup? What if Sinclair Dynamics had baited me with a fake domain hoping to reel me in? The closer I got to Redmond, the louder those doubts became. But when the Microsoft gates appeared, armed guards passed scanners. The polished architecture of corporate ambition, my pulse steadied. This was real. A receptionist guided me through the maze of glass corridors to a conference room overlooking Lake Sammamish. The walls shimmered with interactive displays of quantum code and holographic projections. It felt like standing inside the future. Lynn Park entered precisely on time. She was in her mid-40s, sleek bob haircut, eyes sharp behind wireframe glasses. Dr. Sinclair, she greeted, extending a hand. "Thank you for coming." "Thank you for the invitation," I said, shaking her hand firmly. She gestured for me to sit. "We've been following your work for some time." "Quantum Neural Core." "Correct, Helios," I said. "That's its real name." Lynn smiled slightly. "Helios. Fitting." She opened a digital portfolio on the table display. My old abstracts appeared public data I'd uploaded years ago under the pseudonym Silent Engineer. My words. My code dissected and studied by one of the most powerful tech divisions on Earth. "We've attempted empathy simulation at the quantum layer," before Lynn said, scrolling through lines of code. "But no one's achieved emotional stability within fluctuating quantum states. Your algorithm, it's different. It learns context, not reaction," I explained. "It doesn't mimic emotion, it understands it." She leaned back, studying me. "You know what this means for computing, don't you? Machine ethics, human AI negotiation, even therapy models. It's beyond revolutionary. Her tone was professional, but I could hear the awe underneath. Then she turned the display again. Our valuation team estimates Helios's worth at $2.9 billion. That's our opening bid for exclusive acquisition and research integration. There it was, the number. The same one that had flashed across my phone at that cursed dinner table. I tried to keep my face neutral, but inside a storm was breaking. You're offering to buy it. Full acquisition, she said. You'd join as principal architect under our Quantum Emotional Framework initiative. 10-year contract, full control over development. Full control. Those words landed heavier than the billions. Lynn leaned forward slightly. I understand this technology was originally linked to Sinclair Dynamics. I met her gaze. They lost all claims years ago. The intellectual property belongs solely to me. She nodded, unsurprised. Good. Our legal team will confirm that, but it won't be an issue. We're more interested in what comes next. What comes next, I repeated softly, almost to myself. The presentation ended with a handshake and a non-disclosure agreement that glowed on the glass table before evaporating into encryption. As I walked out, Lynn said quietly, "You've been invisible for years, Dr. Sinclair. That takes discipline. But the world is ready to see you now." Outside, the sun was breaking through the fog. I sat in my car for a long time watching the light scatter across the lake. For years, I had imagined this moment, the validation, the recognition, the billion-dollar offer, and now that it was here, it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like awakening. That night, I opened a private call with Aisha. Her face appeared on the screen, warm and knowing. "You look like someone who just saw a ghost," she said. "Microsoft," I told her. "They want Helios. $2.9 billion. She let out a low whistle. "Congratulations. I haven't accepted." "Because of them," she said quietly. "Yes." Aisha tilted her head. "You don't need their approval, Lena. You never did. It's not about approval. It's about accountability." Her eyes softened. "You want justice. I want balance," I said. "They stole my work, erased my name, buried me. If I sell Helios now, they'll think they were right, that I was just lucky to be rescued by someone bigger. I won't let that be my story." Aisha nodded slowly. "Then what's your plan?" I looked past the camera to the glowing servers behind me. "I'm going home." She didn't ask what I meant. She just said, "Then make sure you take everything they fear." The next day I began preparing for the return. I reopened old accounts under my real name. I transferred partial ownership of Helios to a newly registered shell company, LS Quantum Systems, and filed for partnership rights with Microsoft instead of full acquisition. The message was clear: I wasn't selling out. I was coming to the table as an equal. At night, I reread my grandfather's old notes, the ones I'd scanned years ago. His handwriting curved elegantly across the yellowed paper. True innovation doesn't shout. It transforms in silence, then speaks in results. By the third day, the plan was complete. Sinclair Dynamics had scheduled their annual shareholders' gala that weekend. The shareholders' gala was the one time a year those fractional votes could be leveraged. I wasn't invited, of course, but I didn't need an invitation. I had something better: ownership. The board had quietly sold off parts of the company's original research assets years ago, but a clause in my grandfather's trust deed still granted me fractional voting shares, small forgotten numbers that when combined with certain recent transfers could shift power in unexpected ways, especially if those shares were now backed by Microsoft's legal team. I smiled at the thought. The irony was exquisite. Before midnight, I drafted one final email to Lynn Park. Partnership terms will depend on ownership clarification. Expect movement at Sinclair Dynamics within the week. Her reply came minutes later. Understood. We'll be watching closely. I closed the laptop, the hum of the servers filling the room. For years, they had laughed at me for hiding in basements. They'd called me naive, delusional, unprofitable. Now, from another basement, the one they never knew about, I was about to take everything back. As I turned off the lights, I caught my reflection in the window, a ghost in the glass, half shadow, half fire. Worthless. I whispered, echoing my father's voice one last time. The smile was cold, the kind that cost more than any corporation could pay. Then I smiled. We'll see. Outside, the rain began again, soft, steady, and full of promise. The Sinclair Dynamics headquarters hadn't changed. The glass facade still glimmered against the Seattle skyline, bold letters spelling the family name as if it belonged to something greater than us. I parked across the street and sat in silence for a long moment, watching employees stream through the revolving doors. 10 years of my life had been buried in that building. Now I was back not as their forgotten daughter, but as the woman who held the key to their future. Inside the lobby, the marble floors gleamed under sterile light. The receptionist didn't recognize me. She didn't need to. "I'm here to see Mr. Sinclair," I said. My voice was calm, measured. "Tell him it's his daughter." She blinked, uncertain. "Do you have an appointment?" "He'll make time," I said, and handed her my card. The embossed logo of LS Quantum Systems caught the light silver on black. Her expression changed. Within minutes, 2 security guards appeared not to remove me, but to escort me upstairs. The elevator ride felt endless. Every floor we passed carried memories labs. I once worked in offices I'd been denied ideas that had been stolen and repackaged. When the doors opened on the executive floor, the smell of polished wood and expensive cologne filled the air. My father stood near the window, phone in hand, voice raised in controlled irritation. "I told you to finalize the Vortex deal before the board meeting, not after." His tone softened only slightly when he turned. "Lena." The word was flat, almost cautious. "You should have called," he said, setting down the phone. "I figured a surprise would make more impact." He frowned. "You shouldn't be here." "Funny," I said, walking toward him. "That's what you told me the day you shut down my lab." Ryan entered from the adjoining office, his smirk instant. "Look who crawled back from the dead." "Did the Microsoft rumor get to your head?" I smiled faintly. "You've been keeping tabs." "Public gossip," he said. "Word is that some mysterious researcher got Microsoft's attention. I should have known it was you. Then you should have known to be afraid." Father's eyes narrowed. "What do you want, Lena?" "Recognition," I said softly. "And correction." I opened my laptop on the conference table, projecting documents onto the glass wall, Microsoft's offer letter, the partnership clause, and most importantly, the newly filed ownership records for Sinclair Dynamics Intellectual Property Portfolio, Section 14C. Ryan's face was drained of color. "That section was liquidated years ago." "Not entirely," I said. "Turns out Grandpa's trust still retained fractional shares of the research division, the same shares he designated for his direct heirs in case of attempted misappropriation." Father stepped forward. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that when you tried to sell my division without my consent, the clause triggered. Those shares reverted to me automatically." "Which means Dad." I turned to face him fully. "I now control 48% of Sinclair Dynamics research assets." For a moment, no one spoke. The silence was delicious. Ryan broke it with a bark of laughter. "That's impossible." "Even if it's true, you can't." "I can," I interrupted. "And I already did. Microsoft's legal department verified it this morning. They're not buying from you. They're partnering with me." My father's jaw clenched. "You've gone too far, Lena. This is extortion." "No," I said evenly. "This is restitution." Behind me, the door opened. A group of executives and board members filed in, summoned by my earlier email subject line, "Urgent Ownership Clarification." Their faces reflected confusion, curiosity, and unease. I turned to them. "Thank you for coming. I know the timing is unexpected." One of them, an older man with wire-rimmed glasses, cleared his throat. "Ms. Sinclair, what is this about?" "An overdue correction," I said. "I'm here to propose a new direction for Sinclair Dynamics, one that prioritizes innovation over imitation." Ryan scoffed. "You mean your emotional AI nonsense funny," I said. "That nonsense just secured a multi-billion-dollar partnership." The projection shifted, displaying the Microsoft valuation report, and the press release scheduled for next week. Gasps rippled through the room. Another board member leaned forward. "Is this legitimate?" "Every number is verified," I said. "You can check with Redmond." Father's voice cut through the noise. This company was built on my name, my sacrifices. Grandpa's name, I corrected. You inherited his legacy and turned it into a factory. I'm just taking it back. His expression hardened. You think the board will side with you? They've worked with me for 20 years. Then maybe it's time they remember what loyalty really means. I pulled out another document. Article 7 of the company charter transfer of voting rights in cases of attempted IP coercion. It's an old clause. You probably forgot to remove it. Ryan's face paled. That clause doesn't apply, I finished for him. It does. The moment you both tried to sell my research to Vortex Robotics, the clause activated. Congratulations, gentlemen. I'm now the majority shareholder of Sinclair Dynamics. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. My father's hand trembled as he gripped the table edge. Ryan's practiced smirk evaporated, replaced by a raw, naked panic I'd never seen him allow the world to witness. He stared at me like I'd become a stranger. Finally, Father said, "You planned this." "For 5 years," I replied. "You taught me how to plan, remember? You called it strategy. I just refined it." The boardroom was spinning with murmurs, now half awe, half panic. I let them whisper. Every sound was a symphony of justice. Then I said calmly, "There will be an emergency board meeting tomorrow morning. We'll discuss restructuring, starting with leadership changes." Ryan stepped forward, voice shaking. "You can't just walk in here and take everything I already did." I closed the laptop, slipped it into my bag, and turned toward the door. "I'll see you both in the morning." My father's voice followed me, hoarse and low. "You'll destroy this family." I paused without looking back. "You did that years ago. I'm just rebuilding what's left." Outside, the elevator doors closed behind me with a soft hiss. As I descended, my phone vibrated. A new message from Lynn Park. "We saw the filings." "Congratulations, Ms. Sinclair. You just made history." I smiled faintly, the city lights rising to meet me. The reflection in the elevator glass showed not the quiet daughter they used to dismiss, but the woman they could no longer control. When the doors opened to the lobby, the receptionist looked up from her desk, startled. "How did it go?" she asked softly. I adjusted my code and said, "It's just beginning." She offered a small, knowing nod of affirmation. As I stepped into the rain, thunder rolled across the sky. The storm was coming, but for once it was mine. The boardroom smelled of tension and aftershave. The air was thick with the weight of anticipation, the kind that comes before a storm tears down a house. 14 board members sat around the long glass table, papers neatly stacked, coffee untouched. The Sinclair Dynamics logo gleamed on the wall behind me like a ghost of authority. I stood at the far end of the room, next to the same window where my father had once lectured me about business realities. Today he sat in the middle of the table, shoulders stiff, face pale but defiant. Ryan sat beside him, hands clasped, eyes darting between me and the documents in front of him. "This emergency meeting will come to order," the corporate secretary announced, voice trembling. I didn't wait for permission. "Let's start with facts." A hush fell. I placed my tablet on the table, its display flashing to life with company records, emails, and transfer logs. As of 8:03 this morning, my ownership share in Sinclair Dynamics stands at 51%. Verified by the Washington State Corporate Registry. Effective immediately, I am the controlling shareholder. A few board members exchanged stunned looks. One of them, Mr. Huang from Legal Affairs, cleared his throat. "Ms. Sinclair, if this is true, it fundamentally changes the company's governance structure." "It does," I said. "And that's why we're here, to rebuild what my father and brother turned into a corporate graveyard." My father leaned forward. "You can't just waltz in and take over. These people have followed me for decades." I met his gaze. "Then they've followed you straight into stagnation. For years, this company has lived off borrowed brilliance, mine included. That ends today." Ryan shot up from his chair. "This is insane. You're not even on the payroll. You don't understand what it takes to run a business." "Actually," I said coolly, "I understand exactly what it takes. Innovation. Integrity. 2 things this board hasn't seen in years." I tapped my tablet, switching to a new screen. Security footage filled the display clips from internal meetings time-stamped over the last 5 years. "Recognize anyone?" I asked. Gasps spread through the room as images appeared of Ryan and several executives discussing data acquisitions from competing firms, rerouting funds, and silencing whistleblowers. "These," I said, "are from the company's own security archives. I've spent the last 3 months compiling evidence of intellectual property theft, insider trading, and fraud, all sanctioned or ignored by the leadership of this company." The room erupted in whispers. My father slammed a hand on the table. "You hacked our systems," I smiled faintly. "No, I just finally read the files your IT department thought I was too naive to find." Mr. Roberts from the audit committee spoke up. "This is serious. If what she's showing is accurate, we could face a federal investigation." "We?" I said. "No, Mr. Roberts. They." I nodded toward my father and brother. "You won't go down with them. You're going to help me fix this company." Ryan's voice cracked. "You think the board will follow you, some self-righteous scientist with no business sense?" I turned toward him, my voice low but steady. "I think they'll follow the only person who can save this company from collapsing when the truth comes out." I swiped to another slide, Microsoft's partnership confirmation projected in glowing letters across the boardroom wall. Microsoft has officially recognized LS Quantum Systems as the owner of the Helios technology. They're offering integration and funding under Sinclair Dynamics provided that I retain leadership control. Effective immediately, the proposed sale of the AI division to Vortex Robotics is terminated. The board murmured in disbelief. "That's not a rumor," I continued. "That's the future. A future with quantum empathy AI, sustainable robotics, and transparency. Or," I turned to my father, "you can keep selling your soul to defense contracts and watching the company rot from the inside." Father stood, voice rising. "You're destroying everything this family built." "No," I said. "You destroyed it the moment you turned innovation into imitation." The secretary's pen trembled in his hand. "Do we vote?" he asked quietly. Mr. Huang looked around the room, hesitating, then nodded. "All those in favor of appointing Dr. Lena Sinclair as interim CEO pending investigation," one by one hands began to rise. Slowly, reluctantly, but they rose. Ryan slammed his fist down. "You can't do this. She's manipulating you." "Sit down, Ryan," Mr. Roberts said. "You've done enough manipulating for all of us." My father didn't move. His hand hovered above the table, shaking slightly. Then he said almost to himself, "Your grandfather warned me about you. He said you had too much of his fire." "Then maybe you should have listened," I said. The secretary's voice broke the silence. Motion carried. "Dr. Sinclair, you are now interim CEO." It took everything in me to stay composed as the words sank in. Years of humiliation, of being dismissed, erased, betrayed, condensed into one simple declaration. I exhaled slowly. "Thank you." Turning to the board, I said, "Effective immediately. We're initiating internal audits and restructuring. Every department involved in data theft will be reviewed. Employees who were silenced or terminated unjustly will be reinstated. This company will once again stand for real innovation." The room buzzed with cautious approval. I gathered my things and walked toward the door. Ryan's voice followed me. "You think this makes you untouchable? The shareholders won't stand for this. The press will hear the truth." I said, not turning around. "And for once it'll come from someone who earned the right to speak." When I reached the hallway, I paused. Through the glass walls, I could see my father still sitting at the table, his face ashen, Ryan whispering furiously beside him. For the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt distance, like I was already moving into a future where their voices no longer reached me. My assistant, a young woman I'd met through the collective, approached with a tablet. "Dr. Sinclair," she said, "the press release draft is ready. Microsoft confirmed the embargo ends at noon." "Send it," I said. We stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed, I glanced one last time at the boardroom. The empire that had once buried me was now cracking open under its own weight. When the elevator doors opened on the ground floor, the building's digital displays had already changed. The company's homepage flashed across every screen. Sinclair Dynamics appoints Dr. Lena Sinclair as interim CEO. Announces strategic quantum partnership with Microsoft. People gathered around the monitors whispering. Some looked shocked. Others smiled quietly, almost in relief. I walked through them head high. Outside sunlight cut through the clouds for the first time in weeks. My phone buzzed with a new message from Lynn Park. Welcome to the real world, CEO. I smiled and typed back, time to rebuild it. The rain had stopped, but the air still carried the scent of thunder. Something was ending and something far greater was beginning. The morning after the takeover, the building felt different. The same marble floors, the same glass walls, but the air carried something new. Movement energy, the faint hum of anticipation. I walked through the executive corridor that had once been sealed behind biometric locks, now open to everyone. The old portraits of my father and his board allies were gone, replaced by digital displays showing live data from our research servers. For the first time, Sinclair Dynamics looked alive. In the center of the lobby, reporters waited behind security barriers, their flashes like fireflies against the glass. The press release had detonated overnight. Sinclair Aris takes control. Quantum AI partnership with Microsoft confirmed. I ignored the cameras and headed for the elevator. The real story wasn't upstairs, it was underground. My private access code opened the elevator panel to a level no one else knew existed. As the doors closed, I whispered sub-level 9. The elevator hummed softly and began to descend deeper than any of the official floor plans showed. When the doors opened, cool air washed over me. The underground facility stretched wide beneath the city, a secret I'd built during my years in exile. The lights flickered on, revealing rows of quantum servers glowing pale blue, their steady pulses synchronized like heartbeats. At the center stood the prototype Helios 2.0. Dr. Aisha Rahman was already there wearing her lab coat and an exhausted smile. "You really did it," she said as I walked in. "I had to," I said. "They would have buried it otherwise." She gestured to the team of engineers and scientists around her, some from Microsoft's quantum division, others from the collective. "Everyone's ready for the demonstration. Let's begin." The holographic interface projected above the central console a swirl of particles forming into a human-like silhouette of light. The Helios system came online, its voice calm and steady. "Good morning, Dr. Sinclair." The sound of it still gave me chills. "Good morning, Helios." Aisha handed me a tablet. We integrated the empathy models with the new quantum stability algorithm. The results are unbelievable. I scrolled through the data neural synchronizations at 99.9% real-time ethical reasoning without bias drift. "This shouldn't be possible," I whispered. "Neither should you," Aisha said with a grin. Yet here we are. We ran the live demo for the first time. On the main screen, Helios processed thousands of global datasets, climate projections, medical diagnostics, behavioral analyses, and began generating solutions. "Quantum forecasting is complete," it said. "Projected reductions in atmospheric carbon achievable within 9 years using algorithmic fusion recycling." The room erupted in applause. I couldn't help but smile. This was what real innovation looked like, what my grandfather had dreamed of. Aisha leaned close. "This is beyond AI. You've created consciousness that understands empathy." "Not consciousness," I said softly. "Alignment." She nodded. "You're going to change everything." Before I could reply, my phone buzzed an encrypted message from an unknown source. I opened it. "They're watching. Internal surveillance is active. Proceed carefully. W." I locked the screen, my stomach tightening. "Aisha, activate secure mode. Full isolation from the corporate network." Her brow furrowed, but she nodded. The hum of the servers shifted as connections were severed firewalls, sealing the system off from outside access. When she looked back at me, her expression was serious. "You think your father's still trying to interfere?" "I don't think," I said. "I know." That afternoon, the emergency board session reconvened upstairs. The same faces, the same tension, but this time the fear was different. It wasn't disbelief. It was recognition. Project Helios. I began connecting my tablet to the central display. This is the reason Sinclair Dynamics exists again. The holographic visuals filled the room simulations of quantum networks, energy grids, and global applications. Helios isn't just an algorithm, I continued. It's a self-learning ethical infrastructure designed to stabilize quantum systems and apply empathy to decision-making models. One of the board members leaned forward. In English, Dr. Sinclair, it means we can build technology that thinks responsibly. There was silence then, murmurs of awe. Ryan, sitting beside father, forced a laugh. Ethical machines sounds poetic. How does poetry increase revenue? I turned to him, smiling coldly. Funny. That's exactly what they said about personal computers in the 70s. He opened his mouth, but father raised a hand. Enough, Ryan. I caught his eye, but he didn't look away. There was something different in his expression, less arrogance, more calculation. This technology, he said, slowly could attract government interest. Defense funding. Strategic applications. No, I said. We're not weaponizing empathy. He gave a thin smile. You think you can control how it's used, I can, I said. Because I own it. I tapped my tablet again, displaying the legal document filed that morning. Project Helios. Patent ownership, LS Quantum Systems, licensed exclusively to Sinclair Dynamics. The clause below it sealed the statement, use restricted to humanitarian, environmental, and medical development. The board erupted in murmurs again. Father's jaw tightened. You'll ruin us with those limitations. Or redeem us, I said. The secretary looked up. Do we have a vote on the new corporate mission statement? I nodded. Yes. Effective immediately. Sinclair Dynamics will transition from military contracts to sustainable AI development. Project Helios will be our cornerstone. The vote passed narrowly. But enough. As the meeting adjourned, Father stayed seated, his gaze fixed on the holographic image of Helios above the table. You're turning this company into something it was never meant to be, he said quietly. No, I replied. I'm turning it back into what it was supposed to be. I left him there, surrounded by the ghost of his own creation. That night I returned to Sublevel 9. The lab was dim, the hum of the quantum cores soft and steady. Aisha was gone. The others had gone home. Only Helios remained, its pulsing light reflecting off the glass. Dr. Sinclair. It said you looked troubled. I'm fine, I said. Untrue, Helios replied. You are processing conflicting emotional signals. Satisfaction, apprehension, nostalgia. Helios was right. I felt the cold grip of apprehension beneath the surface of my victory. Would you like to share it? Asked. I hesitated. My father doesn't understand what we're building. He thinks control is strength. But control without empathy is chaos. Empathy is not weakness, Helios said. I know. I walked closer to the console. But some people never will. The system hummed softly. Then teach them. I looked at the projection, the swirl of light and energy that had once existed only in my imagination. That's the plan. I powered down the lights and headed toward the elevator. As the doors closed, I turned back one last time. Helios pulsed once like a heartbeat. Outside, the night air was cool, the city alive with motion and sound. Above me, the Sinclair Tower glowed with a new light, our logo illuminated in blue instead of gold. The color of change. Tomorrow, the world would learn what Helios could do. But tonight, for the first time in my life, I wasn't just reclaiming my legacy. I was defining it. The headlines hit the financial world like a thunderclap. Sinclair Dynamics announces full ethical pivot. Ends all defense contracts. Stockholders panicked. Analysts screamed. Overnight, billions in military funding evaporated, and the same people who had praised my father's strategic brilliance were now calling for his resignation. By Monday morning, the boardroom was chaotic. Lawyers shouted, phones rang non-stop, and my father, Charles Sinclair, sat at the head of the table, silent for once, the color drained from his face. Ryan hovered behind him, his confidence cracking like a bad veneer. You've destroyed us, Ryan hissed as I entered. Do you have any idea what this means for our investors? Yes, I said calmly, taking my seat. It means they'll finally have to invest in something that matters. You're naive, he snapped. You think Microsoft's partnership will protect us from the fallout? It already has, I said, sliding a report across the table. Since the announcement, our stock recovered 40%. The civilian AI market is exploding and Helios is leading the charge. My father's voice was low, trembling with restrained rage. You've made enemies, Lena. The Department of Defense doesn't forgive easily. Neither do daughters, I said. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut glass. The board's audit committee entered moments later, followed by 2 compliance officers and a government liaison. Mr. Roberts from the committee cleared his throat. Mr. Sinclair, we've completed our preliminary review. We need to discuss your offshore accounts and procurement records. My father's head jerked up. What? The officer set a folder on the table, thick with documents. Evidence suggests several illegal transactions linked to your private subsidiaries. Shell companies in Panama and Zurich used to funnel funds from classified contracts. Some of those accounts overlap with stolen research assets. Ryan's face went gray. That's ridiculous. Those accounts were authorized by you, I said, cutting him off. I found the files weeks ago. The board members shifted uneasily. Father's eyes burned into mine. You planted this. I didn't need to, I said. The intelligence from W was perfect. They caught the transfers in real time, giving me the complete trail you left a mile wide. The liaison closed the folder. Federal authorities will handle the investigation. Until then, Mr. Sinclair, we recommend immediate suspension pending further review. For the first time, my father looked old. His shoulders sagged, his voice barely above a whisper. You would destroy your own family for power. I'm not destroying anything, I said quietly. I'm saving what's left. Ryan lunged up from his chair. This is a setup. She's been planning this for years, don't you see that? Yes, I said. I plan to stop you from turning our name into a weapon. Mission accomplished. He glared at me, chest heaving. You think you've won? You can't rebuild what you just burned down. I don't need to rebuild it, I said. I'm building something new. The officers escorted my father Charles out of the boardroom. He didn't resist. As the doors closed behind him, Ryan turned on me one last time. You'll regret this, Lena. The world doesn't run on empathy. It runs on fear. Then maybe it's time for a new engine, I said. Later that afternoon, I stood in my father's office, the same one where he had once told me I'd never belong here. His chair still faced the skyline, but the desk was bare, stripped of authority. On the wall hung a portrait of my grandfather, the one father had moved to the hallway years ago. I walked over and set it back in its rightful place above the desk. You were right, Grandpa, I whispered. They only understand when they lose what they took for granted. The door opened softly behind me. Aisha stepped in, holding a folder. The investigators confirmed it. Charles and Ryan are officially under review for corporate fraud and intellectual theft. I exhaled. It's over then. For them, she said. But not for you. I turned, raising an eyebrow. What do you mean? She smiled faintly. You're CEO now. The real work begins. 2 days later, the press descended like vultures. Cameras lined the steps of Sinclair Tower. Microphones shoved forward, questions shouted over one another. Dr. Sinclair, is it true your father's under federal investigation? Is the company in danger of collapse? Is Project Helios a government experiment? I stopped at the podium, the sun glinting off a sea of lenses. Sinclair Dynamics has made mistakes, I said. But we're changing. Project Helios represents a new chapter technology rooted in ethics, empathy, and transparency. We will not profit from pain. We will not build machines that destroy. We will build tools that heal. The crowd murmured scribbling notes. One reporter called out, Are you saying your father was wrong? I looked straight into the camera. No, I said softly. I'm saying he forgot what we were meant to be. That night, news stations replayed the clip on loop. The quiet genius speaks. Social media lit up with debates, some calling me a visionary, others branding me naive. I didn't care. For once, the narrative wasn't theirs to write. A week later, I visited my father. The federal holding facility was cold, the kind of place where ambition went to die. He sat on the other side of the glass gray suit, wrinkled eyes tired but defiant. "I suppose you're enjoying this," he said through the phone. "No," I said. "There's no joy in watching something you once admired collapse." He studied me for a long moment. "You've become everything I feared you would." "Good," I said. "Fear was always your measure of power." He leaned closer to the glass. "You think the world will thank you for your idealism. They'll chew you up, Lena. You're playing a game you don't understand." I met his gaze. "Maybe. But at least I'm playing for something real." For a moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Regret, maybe, or pride buried too deep to show. Then the guard signaled the end of visiting hours. I placed the phone back on the cradle and stood. As I turned to leave, his voice echoed through the receiver, muffled but clear enough to hear, "You sound like him." I paused. "Who your grandfather?" he said. The guards led me out before I could reply. When I returned to the tower, the city lights shimmered through the glass. Aisha was waiting in my office with a fresh report. "Ryan's agreed to cooperate," she said. "He's giving testimony in exchange for leniency." "Let him," I said. "He'll finally tell the truth." She smiled slightly. "You don't even sound angry." "I'm not," I said. "He's exactly where he belongs under oath." I sat behind the desk, the same one that once belonged to my father, and opened my laptop. Helios's interface blinked to life. "Good evening, Dr. Sinclair," it said. "Would you like to review the new projections?" "Not yet," I said. "Tell me something instead. What would you like to hear?" "Tell me we're doing the right thing." There was a pause. Then Helios answered, "You are correcting an imbalance. That is what right feels like." I smiled. "Thank you." As I looked out over the glowing skyline of Seattle, I realized the war was over not between me and my father, but between the past and the future. And for the first time in the history of Sinclair Dynamics, the future had a conscience. The city was quiet again. A month had passed since the investigation ended, and the building that once bore her family's name now glimmered with a new sign, Helios Technologies. The old Sinclair logo was gone along with the arrogance it represented. Employees walked through the glass doors with a sense of purpose, not fear. For the first time in decades, innovation no longer meant manipulation. It meant freedom. "For years, Sinclair Dynamics ran on fear," Lena said softly as she stepped into the lobby. "Helios runs on freedom." The marble floor reflected the morning sunlight, and the steel letters above the entrance, "Innovation without empathy is destruction." She paused under the words and smiled. This, she thought, was how revolutions began, not with noise, but with change too steady to ignore. Upstairs, the new Helios executive team gathered in the boardroom where her father once ruled with intimidation. The walls were glass now, no secrets, no closed doors. Lena took her seat at the head of the table. Around her sat the people who had once been dismissed, betrayed, and buried by corporate politics. Aisha, now Chief Ethics Officer, Eli, Head of Quantum Security, and Yuna, Priya, and Miguel, the scientists who had built miracles in the shadows. "Welcome to the new era," Lena began. "We're rebuilding from the truth." Aisha grinned. "And where exactly are we starting?" Lena clicked a remote, and the Helios emblem appeared on the wall. "With transparency, with equality, with humanity. We're creating a system that values invention over intimidation. Helios will be the company that proves empathy and innovation can coexist." She outlined her plan, a global research network powered by the quantum neural core, funded by new profits and by her personal fortune. 10% of all revenue would go into the Helios Foundation, a trust for young scientists who had been excluded from traditional academia, especially women. Aisha frowned slightly. "You're giving away part of the profit." "It's not charity," Lena said, her voice calm. "It's calibration. The balance of my family broke." Eli leaned forward. Then let's start the recalibration. That morning, they launched what Lena called Phase 2, the Quiet Revolution. Weeks later, the Helios team gathered in the demonstration hall. Rows of engineers, investors, and journalists sat in silence as Lena stood before the glowing quantum chamber. The core pulsed like a heartbeat, steady, golden, alive. 3 years ago, this was an idea written off as fantasy, she said. Today, it's the foundation of something much larger than me. The holographic display bloomed across the room, 3 massive global initiatives. Quantum health capable of mapping cancer proteins in hours instead of years. Climate Helios, a predictive system that forecasted environmental change down to individual neighborhoods. And Helios Shield, a quantum ethical encryption that prevented AI from being used for warfare or surveillance. Lena's voice was steady, almost reverent. We built machines that think. Now we're teaching them to feel. A reporter raised a hand. Are you creating God? She smiled faintly. No. We're creating conscience, something humanity keeps losing. The screen dimmed. The audience rose to its feet, applause swelling like a wave. Lena turned toward the window overlooking the city. No, she murmured. We're just beginning. But even as the applause swelled, I knew Vortex Robotics, with their defense contracts dissolving, wasn't going to let this future happen quietly. That afternoon, she drove to Mercer Island. The house she grew up in stood quiet by the lake. Her mother, Elena, was there packing boxes in the living room. Elena looked smaller, softer, without the pearls and designer suits. The house is sold, her mother said quietly. I know, Lena replied. They sat by the window, watching the sunset pour across the lake. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Elena said, Your father thought love meant control. I thought silence meant support. We were both wrong. Lena reached across the table and took her mother's trembling hand. Silence can heal too, she said, if it's filled with understanding, not fear. Her mother smiled weakly and opened her palm. Inside was a small locket, her grandfather's, the one Lena had admired as a child. Lena took the microchip key from the silver bracelet she wore and clicked it into the carefully hidden latch on the back of the locket. He would be proud of you, Elena whispered. He already is, Lena said, fastening the locket around her neck. Every time I build instead of break. They embraced as the last light faded over the water. No tears, no apologies, just peace. That night after the summit, she sat alone in her office. Seattle shimmered outside the glass walls, the skyline alive with moving lights. The AI Helios heart interface blinked softly on her desk. Her reflection in the glass merged with the city's glow. My father built an empire of control, she whispered. I built a legacy of compassion. Both will be remembered, but only one will live on. Later that night, Lena walked through the lab. The quantum core pulsed gently behind reinforced glass, its light flickering like a heartbeat. Eli appeared beside her. What do we call this version? Lena smiled. Helios Heart. She pressed her hand to the glass. This isn't just technology. It's forgiveness made visible. The hum of the machine deepened a rhythm that felt almost human. As dawn rose over the sound, she stepped out onto the terrace. The city below glittered gold. For the first time in her life, Lena felt entirely free, no debts, no ghosts, no noise. Revenge had built her empire. Forgiveness would sustain it. The morning was silent, the kind of silence that felt sacred. Outside Seattle was waking up, but the top floor of Helios Tower still glowed in soft amber light. Lena stood by the window, a mug of black coffee in her hand, staring at the rising sun. On her desk, her tablet blinked with a new notification, letter received, from Elena Sinclair. Her breath caught. It had been months since she'd last seen her mother. The subject line was simple, almost old-fashioned for my daughter. For years, Lena whispered to herself, silence was our only language. Maybe now it's time to listen. She sat down, opened the letter, and the words appeared in her mother's handwriting, delicate, steady, and heartbreakingly familiar. My dearest Lena, You were always the quiet one. I mistook your silence for weakness when it was the sound of strength learning to breathe. Lena froze, eyes tracing every letter as her mother's voice seemed to rise from the page soft and trembling. Your father built walls with ambition. I built mine with fear. I thought love meant protection, not understanding. I see now that I was wrong. Lena felt something shift in her chest, an ache old and familiar, but lighter than before. The letter continued. When you left, I told myself it was for your own good. That the world would humble you, that failure would bring you home. But the truth is, I couldn't face how much courage you had to walk away. You didn't just prove your father wrong. You proved me wrong too. You showed the world that light doesn't have to shout to be seen. Her eyes blurred with tears. She wiped them away, but her throat tightened. The years of resentment, the arguments, the distance, it all felt suddenly small. She whispered, I spent years trying to earn your approval, and all you wanted was my peace. She set the letter down and walked to the glass wall overlooking the city. It was so bright now she had to squint. She wasn't my enemy, she murmured. She was just trapped in the same silence. Lena picked up the letter again, flipping to the second page. If you're reading this, I've left the old house behind. I don't belong to that version of us anymore. I've sold it, and with it every echo of what we became. Don't carry our guilt, Lena. You've already turned pain into purpose. If your father ever finds peace, let him. He was never built for your kind of strength. You carry the brilliance of your grandfather, the one who saw what we couldn't. Keep building. But remember, even light needs to rest. And when you feel alone, look to the horizon. That's me proud of the woman you became. Love, Mom. The last line blurred completely as her tears finally spilled over. She pressed the page to her chest, eyes closed, breathing deeply. She didn't just forgive, Lena whispered. She freed us. She folded the letter carefully and slipped it into her coat pocket before leaving the office. Outside, the air was cool and crisp. She drove to Mercer Island, to the lake where she'd spent countless afternoons as a child. The house was empty now, the furniture gone, the walls stripped bare. But the smell of cedar and rain was still there. Lena walked through each room slowly, fingers brushing along the walls, memories unfolding like ghosts. In the study, sunlight poured through the window. She sat on the old window bench and read the letter again, hearing every word like a heartbeat. A seagull called outside. Lena looked up, watching as a flock lifted into the sky over the lake. The reflection of the wings shimmered across the water. You're free now, Mom, she whispered. So am I. When she returned to Helios Tower that evening, the lab was alive with quiet energy. Researchers moved between holographic displays, laughter echoing through the halls. The world she had built was finally what it was meant to be. She walked into her office and looked around. On the wall above her desk hung 3 photos, her grandfather, her mother, and a younger version of herself. Underneath a brass plaque gleamed softly, Innovation with Heart, the Sinclair Legacy. She reached into her coat pocket, unfolded the letter once more, and slipped it into a clear frame beside her mother's picture. She reached up, touching the locket, the silver key inside the final safeguard for Helios. She stood there for a long moment, listening to the hum of the quantum core, downstairs the heartbeat of her revolution. Her assistant knocked gently on the door. Dr. Sinclair, she said, smiling, the Helios Fellowship just went live. First global mentorship program. Over 10,000 applications already. Lena smiled softly. That's what happens when you give the quiet ones a place to speak. When the assistant left, Lena sat down and reread one line of her mother's letter, keep your silence, but fill it with purpose. The city outside shimmered in blue and gold. The tower lights reflected on the sound, like constellations reborn. She opened her notebook, writing a single line beneath the company motto, "Forgiveness is the final form of intelligence." Then she looked up out toward the horizon. In the fading light, she imagined her mother standing there, hand raised in quiet pride. Thank you, Lena whispered. The sound of the quantum servers deepened into a slow, steady rhythm, but Helios's synthesized voice cut through it sharply. Sinclair. I detect a severe non-ethical quantum instability signature attempting to breach the Helios shield. Source: unaffiliated military contractor, possibly Vortex Robotics. The night settled over Seattle, no longer soft but tense, alive with the hum of something greater than vengeance. Lena turned off the office lights. As the room darkened, the only glow came from the framed letter on the wall. The ink shimmered faintly under the reflection of the city below. She closed the door behind her. The Helios Tower stood tall against the sky, no longer a monument to ambition, but to redemption under threat. 3 years later, the world looked different. The skyline of Seattle shimmered with solar glass towers, and at the heart of it all stood the Helios Tower, no longer a monument of ego, but a living symbol of purpose. The morning news played on every screen. Helios Technologies awarded Nobel recognition for humanitarian quantum innovation. Lena stood backstage at the Geneva International Forum, the air crisp and filled with the sound of cameras clicking. Aisha adjusted her microphone and whispered, "You ready for this, Dr. Sinclair?" Lena smiled faintly. "I was born ready. I just needed time to evolve." When she walked out, the room fell into a reverent hush. The world's brightest minds, presidents, and journalists leaned forward as she approached the podium. "They once called me worthless," she began, her voice calm and resonant. "Now they call me visionary. But neither matters. What matters is what we build after the noise." The audience erupted in applause, but Lena didn't pause for validation. Her gaze swept across the crowd, people from every nation, every background, all drawn together by the promise of a better world. Helios had become that promise. When the ceremony ended, Lena stepped outside into the cool Geneva air. Snowflakes fell gently onto the marble steps, melting on her skin. She looked up at the sky and whispered, "Thank you, grandfather. You were right. The quiet ones build revolutions." That afternoon, she flew back to Seattle. The city glowed gold beneath her as the plane descended like a circuit board of light pulsing with life. Helios Tower awaited stronger, warmer human. Lena walked through the marble foyer. She paused there for a moment, remembering the girl who had once been told her research was a waste of time. She smiled softly. "Look at us now." Her heels clicked against the marble as she walked toward the executive elevator. It opened to reveal a hall lined with photographs. Every face was a testament to what she had built, a home for brilliance that once had no voice. In her office, sunlight spilled across the glass desk. A single framed photo sat beside the holographic Helios heart display, a picture of her family, faded but still warm. Later that evening, the annual Helios Fellowship Summit began. The auditorium was filled with more than 500 women in STEM from over 50 countries. Banners hung with the words, "The quiet ones will lead." Aisha stood on stage first, beaming with pride. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the woman who turned silence into science, Dr. Lena Sinclair." Applause thundered as Lena stepped into the light. She waited until the crowd stilled, then spoke with a steady conviction that carried years of storms and survival. "This isn't about revenge anymore, it's about redemption," she declared. "Because innovation without humanity is just another form of destruction." She gestured to the massive holographic display behind her. Data appeared. Helios Labs now operates in 12 countries. Quantum Health has saved over 50,000 lives through early cancer diagnostics. Helios Shield has prevented over 300 cyber warfare attempts globally. The final slide transitioned, showcasing a small detailed graphic of a neutralized quantum signature labeled Vortex Robotics. Lena looked back at the audience, her voice softening. "They once measured my worth in dollars. Now they measure it in lives changed." The applause rose again, wave after wave, echoing like a heartbeat through the glass walls. That night after the summit ended, Lena stayed behind in the quiet building. The city lights stretched beneath her like rivers of fire. The AI Helios heart interface came alive on her desk, its voice calm and familiar. "Would you like to rest, Lena?" She chuckled softly. "Not yet. There's always one more spark to light." The hum of the quantum core filled the silence. She rose and walked to the main laboratory. Inside, the quantum core pulsed gently behind a wall of glass, its glow reflecting on her face. Eli was waiting near the console. "We've finished the upgrade," he said. "The new version is stable." Lena looked at the rhythmic pulse of light like a beating heart. "It's forgiveness made visible," she said. Outside, the first light of dawn broke over the city. Lena stepped onto the terrace, watching the sunrise spill across the sound. The skyline shimmered gold, mirrored in the glass towers around her. Her phone buzzed a message from the Helios Fellowship Office first global mentorship program launched. Over 10,000 applicants worldwide. She smiled, remembering her mother's last words. "Keep your silence, but fill it with purpose." Lena turned toward the horizon, hair catching the morning light. "My revolution," she whispered, "was never about revenge. It was about rebuilding the world quietly." Later that week, she sat in the small studio at Helios Tower, recording the first episode of the Helios podcast. She spoke into the microphone, her voice low and intimate. "If you've ever been silenced," she said, underestimated, or told that your dreams are worthless, remember this story. Silence isn't weakness. It's the space where revolutions begin. She ended the recording. Outside Helios Tower, rose against the dusk, glowing like a beacon. Across the screen of the building's digital banner appeared the words that now defined her life. "The quiet ones build the loudest legacies." As the night settled over Seattle, the tower shimmered, its light steady and alive, just like the heart of the woman who had built it. And somewhere beyond the horizon, the quiet revolution continued, one brilliant, unshakable idea at a time.